Hi, and thanks for joining me again, where today I'll be showing you how we turn this SketchUp diagram into a real life bed. Picking your timber, such an important step. Take your time to find the straightest pieces you can. You'll thank yourself for it later.
So I'm just laying out the bedposts, and I thought I'd give a quick shout to how I'm making sure that these are exactly the same height and same length. So I saw this from a little YouTube video. As you can see, my mitre station is actually bolted into the bench, so it doesn't move anywhere. Works perfectly for me, gives a lot more trust when I'm using it, so really good and helpful. But I haven't actually sunken it into the table. Haven't got a mitre store station. So instead, all you need is one of these little boxes. So all we've done is made sure that this height here is the same height as this here, and put a couple of fences on it. So put a fence on here to make sure it's 90 degrees with the worktop, and put a little fence on the back here to make sure again that's 90 degrees with here. Pretty cool, pretty easy. If you're cutting repeated cuts on the other side, you take this off at the bottom, unscrew it, made a couple of pilot holes on the other side, flip it round, and you can do the same on the other side. I do have to work with a smaller space in here because I'm in a single garage, and these kind of things just help a little bit, so hopefully it helps you guys as well. Anyway, I'm going to cut some timber.
I always like to cut samples and make prototypes before attacking the real thing. Here I am testing out the thickness I want my post to be. I've set the fence to 55mm square, and I'm happy with that first time I do it. Now it's on to testing the Dowel jig. A simple jig, but the first time I've ever used it. I've got to say, this jig made the build so much easier than I ever thought. Now onto the headboard prototype. I have 25mm stock and plan to use 12mm MDF as the centre panel to give a nice profile. Here I am using the table saw to create the channel that the panel will sit in.
So there we've got two. We've laid them all out. I've got all of my grooves cut in the example I showed you. Quite pleased with how it turned out, to be honest. Not too shabby. So yeah, gonna now cut this piece of MDF 12mm down and see what happens.
Now I have all the posts the same height and thickness, I can start to mark out where I'd like all my dowel holes to be. This was something that I loved about the jig so much. I can mark the centre line as a reference on all and know with confidence that all 3 holes would line up each time. I'll explain why I only marked the centre a little later. It was a mistake, but it lets me try out another feature of the jig. Here I am getting the headboards out of the clamps after a night of drying. To work on some of the larger glue-ups, I've created a temporary outside work table in the garden. And this is Haskell. He'll take any chance to get on camera. I'm testing out the dry fit of the post to the headboard. My plan is to have both panels pre-built with the ability to attach the bed side lengths when assembling in the room. I've decided to use threaded inserts for ease of assembly and disassembly. I'm using a 15mm Forstner bit to act as a countersink for my threaded insert. You'll always see me drilling a little in reverse before making the hole. This is a little tip I picked up from a YouTuber, Bournemouth Woodworking. It prevents any drill tear out and leaves a nice clean cut every time. I'm using epoxy glue when setting my threaded inserts for the strongest hold possible. So this is going back to that mistake I told you about. I only marked the centre hole, as for some reason I had it in my head that I needed to countersink this side as well. Lucky the jig has a finder peg, so you can align it back to the exact place it was last time you made that hole. To reduce the risk of tear out as I drill all the way through, I clamp on a sacrificial piece of timber. Here I am just creating and then later on attaching the runners that will support the bed slats. I take the opportunity now to sand them, because after attaching them it'll be a lot harder. Another tool I love to use, the Biscuit joiner. Just make a line on the centre of the board and set the depth you want, and away you go. I have all my styles Biscuit cut, it's onto the rails. I mark out equal spacing on the side I want to join, and then clamp the two rails together, making sure they are aligned, and trace the marking across both of them. This means when attaching all the styles, they will be aligned to each other. I have a little confession to make. I missed filming the glue up, but it was probably for the best. It was very messy and very stressful, but we got there in the end.
So the other side window fits, no issues with that. I'm going to glue it up now. Wish me luck.
did this little sketch up to help work out the lengths and the angles that I'd need to make the triangle. I'm using 90-degree clamping blocks here to help make sure it stays in place while I attach the larger sash clamp. Now onto the sides of the triangle, where I've got to cut 45-degree ends at the right length for the top to meet. Before super gluing the top pieces together, I again used a 90-degree clamping block to see if my cuts were correct. Some glue in there, get it hold, hope for the best. Hopefully, it'll work out nicely. Here I am, just marking out the centre lines to cut my joints. Never try and use a biscuit joiner upside down. I was very lucky that what I did here didn't cause much damage. So this glue up was made more fun by the fact that I was trying to clamp at an angle. By using the 45-degree offcuts I'd made earlier, I could easily get a good clamping on each end. Now onto milling down the rails around the top of the bed. These are 190 centimetres in length, but lucky for me, my next door neighbour was out in his garage and offered me a hand. Now for making the dowel holes in the top rails and on the bed. My trusty jig couldn't help me this time as of the random angles and the sizes I was working with. So, created my own template. It seemed to work quite well. Now onto sanding. Lots and lots and lots of sanding. First I went over everything with 80 grit and then 120. And here it is in all its glory. I'll talk you through a couple of the final stages that I did when putting this together. First thing, once we got into the room, I painted it. So this is all painted. First of all, I primed it using a white primer, and then sanded down with 240 grit to keep it nice and smooth. I then painted it using a white emulsion. Another addition I did was adding these white oak end pieces. I think it sets off the bed quite nicely and ties it all together. These are shop bought at the size, just had to cut them down, didn't have to do anything to them. Nice and smooth already, so no issues with that.